All right, welcome back to our next episode of Big Reports in 5 minutes, give or take. So in today's episode, I want to talk about this report from Forescout. It's called the 2024 First Half Threat Review. Now, unlike a lot of the other big reports that we do here in 5 minutes, this is kind of a small report. But there were a couple interesting nuggets in here that I wanted to bring up, so I thought I would pull that into this episode. So this is from Forescout, which is big in the operational technology field. They do a lot of vulnerability management for shop floor equipment, but they also do a lot of other things in the enterprise space. So they get a lot of telemetry, a lot of data that they're processing. And so there's some pretty cool statistics in here that they've collected over the first half of the year from their clients and from their technology. One of the things they point out right off the chute here is massive targeting of VPN technology or VPN vulnerabilities. So, if you've been paying any attention at all to the security space, you know that VPN technology is under heavy assault from mostly state actors that are trying to get in and either do espionage, stealing trade secrets, or generally monitoring government activities as they're, trying to either disrupt things or get a foot ahead on their competition. So this report talks a bit about the VPN technologies, especially focusing on Ivanti, Cisco, ASA, and the Fortinet VPN, which has just been attacked recently, if you've been paying attention to the news. One thing that they point out here is that the motivations behind these attacks typically include espionage, data theft, and sometimes the disruption of critical services. So with this war going on in the Ukraine, with China stepping up its efforts to steal intellectual property, you're seeing this big influx of attacks against VPN technologies. So there's a few examples in the report which I thought were noteworthy. And then they move on to just generally the state of vulnerabilities. And this is what really caught my attention and why I wanted to bring this to you guys. So looking at the Forescout technology, and then Forescout was looking at a few of the third-party data repositories out there. They noted that in the first half of 2024, there have been 23,668 vulnerabilities published. So just think about that number. In a 6-month period of time, there have been 23,668 vulnerabilities published, which is an average of 11 new vulnerabilities per day. These are the ones that are discovered and published, not to mention all the other things that are out there like 0 days and some things that don't get published because the technology companies themselves aren't ready to let people know that they're there. So these are publicly disclosed 111 vulnerabilities per day. And then if you look at the total vulnerabilities overall, that's an increase of 7,112 vulnerabilities compared to the first half of last year, which amounts to about a 43% increase. So, just let that soak in for a second. From the first half of last year to the first half of this year, published vulnerabilities have increased by 43%. This is incredible statistics. And, you can look at this chart here and see that if you look out over the last 3 years, so 2022, 23, and 24, by month, you can see that the trend is definitely on the upshoot. So, this is just another reminder that vulnerability management is a critical function of any security program. And if you don't have a security program, vulnerability management is a critical function of risk management. And whatever company you're running, you need to have good risk management practices, which should include vulnerability management so that you're not falling prey to exploits of these vulnerabilities. So speaking of exploits, A key term to keep in mind is known exploitable vulnerabilities, or KEVs. This is kept track of, for the most part, by CISA, which is our cybersecurity and infrastructure security agency of the federal government. They keep track of all these known exploitable vulnerabilities, and it's a good source of reference material as you're trying to figure out how to protect your company, because anything that's in the known vulnerability or known exploitable vulnerability database are things that you should be actively trying to resolve within your organization. So what this report here says that 87 new KEVs were added to the catalog over the first half of the year, which brings the total to 1,140 known exploitable vulnerabilities that are in this database. So again, check that database out, cross-reference that to any vulnerabilities that you're finding in your environment, and those should be the first ones that you're trying to resolve or remediate. Then there's another good chart in here that just talks about how many of these KEVs are released each month. And then another thing that is important is, everyone seems to be on this mindset that, we'll just deal with the new vulnerabilities that are released, and, because those are probably the most likely to be exploited. What CISA points out, and then what Forescout puts into their report, is that 46% of the new additions into that known exploitable vulnerability database are from before 2024. So nearly half of the new known exploitable vulnerabilities are from past years. So these are vulnerabilities that have existed for years and maybe didn't have an exploit, but now they have an exploit because attackers realize that generally people are keeping up to date with current patches, but anything that they haven't done in the past, they're not going back and fixing. So if you can find an exploit for an old vulnerability, those are generally going to be unchecked. Then the next thing that this report talks about is just threat actor by origin. So this is probably not news to anybody who's been paying attention, but just to reiterate it, the number one country for having threat actors is China. So they're using a population of, I think, around 287 threat actors that Forescout is monitoring. Well, they say they monitor 740 threat actors, but 387 have done something in the last 6 months that pulled them into this report. And of this report, China is leading the way with the number of threat actors, followed by Russia and Iran. So obviously no big news there, but just reiterating it again. But when you couple that with the next chart, which is the number of targeted countries by threat actor, the United States is leading the way. So the United States isn't even on the list of threat actors by country of origin, but they're the number one country on the countries being targeted by threat actors. So, just kind of goes to show you how this game is being played. China has the largest number of threat actors, and the United States has the most number of threat actors attacking them. And then we get into ransomware. So ransomware, according to this Forescout report, they went through and they looked at a bunch of public websites that track blockchains and track ransom payments, and so they came up with the number 3,085 ransomware attacks in the first half of 2024, which is an increase of 6% over the first 6 months of last year. So again, ransomware attacks this is just another reinforcement of the idea that ransomware attacks are on the rise. And this comes out to 441 attacks per month, or 15 attacks per day. Now again, this is just the ransomware that results in a ransom payment, because that's all that would show up in a blockchain analysis. So what we have here is 15 ransomware payments made per day, And when you couple that with 111 vulnerabilities by, showing up by day, if you're not actively resolving your vulnerabilities, you are just really playing, a game of Russian roulette with your network, because the vulnerabilities are increasing, the attacks are increasing, and we have very active, adversarial states that are attacking us, on a daily basis. So, and there's another interesting chart in here which says that 50% of all ransomware attacks are against the U.S. Last year it was 48%. We've increased to 50%. So if you are, in the U.S., you don't have a good vulnerability management program, the time is definitely ticking. And then the last piece of this report that I wanted to talk about is they have a section called mitigation recommendations. And the key point that they pull out here is that you really need to start protecting your VPN connectivity. The number of attacks against VPNs, coupled with the rise in ransomware and the number of vulnerabilities that are being discovered in VPN technology and security appliances, is really, pulling together a perfect storm of, really bad things happening to VPN tool sets. So start focusing more on your perimeter defenses, especially around VPN technology, because the adversary is definitely looking for exploits in that technology. And one way that you can protect those VPN tunnels and those different perimeter defenses is by enabling multi-factor authentication. So that's something we've been preaching here for a long time, is the VPN is important, MFA everything. The more you can put MFA on anything that's internet facing, the more secure your organization is going to be, at least for now, until, we find a more advanced way of protecting those technologies. But for now, MFA everything. So with that, as we always say, stay safe out there. We'll see you next time, and thanks for joining.